thing. When we talk about this village, somebody got to ask a question. When is somebody in the village going to understand the lights are not on, people? Somebody needs to learn how to hit the switch and turn on the lights.
Sure.
You see, it sounds good. It all sounds real good. But I've got 17-year-olds who cannot read. And these are not isolated cases. I don't need to tell you that. I've just finished a study. I went up and down this East Coast looking at our schools. It's the same almost everywhere. It is a concerted effort to undereducate. I know we know that. We have to know it because I've got PhDs who want to tell me how they believe my program should run. I've got people with master's degrees who wants to tell me about the 500 at that forum earlier this week. By the time the moderators finished reading everybody's credentials, it was time to go home. These people got credentials as long as my own. With all of these people, you do remember Barry Stanton, who was director of corrections. Barry said it best. With all of the churches and schools we have in our community, why do we have so many young people locked up?
Yep.
It's got to be a finger-pointed session. Let it be.
Let
me
ask you a question, Mr. Lee, because you've been a member of the community for many years, and that area where the entire county is known as one of the most affluent African-American communities in the country. And so you're talking about a lot of PhDs, a lot of very affluent positions and so forth and so on. So from that perspective, why do you think it is a challenge to get people engaged in working with the educators, the law enforcement officials, and other leaders, government leaders, to make sure that things are not just status quo?
Well, I think because our people need to believe that because they live in this most affluent African-American county in the country, they believe that they got it all right. They're doing it just right. They don't need anybody to tell them anything. If you're not doing well, then something must be wrong with you. All these people take their children out of public schools and put them in private schools, so it's no longer their problem. I see this all the time. I see these people living in these $500,000 houses who want to give you the impression that they went to Princeton and their wife went to Harvard, but I know they came out of Southeast just like everybody else. Okay. They just got a job at the post office when they were young, and now they're making a lot of money. Sure. But they don't want anybody to know of their deficiencies. So if I don't want you to know how educated I actually am not, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm not going to get involved because too many questions may be asked. Well, I am telling you.
Well, let me ask you a question, Mr. Lee, not to cut you off, but I often wonder in your travels, for example, when the state's attorney came on our show a couple of months ago, and she has some really dynamic programs going on, how many people are actually going to, and we're just going to pick on her for a minute, how many citizens are actually going to her to say, hey, Madam State's Attorney, here's something we think would be good. We'd like to initiate this in partnership with you. Is that happening that you can see?
Well, I'll say to you, of course, you know her well. And she and I have been friends since she was a young person.
Sure.
She grew up actually in my office for the most part. She spent a lot of time, Chief, with you. Mm-hmm. So she does know a lot of things. Mm-hmm. People are flocking to her. They are.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
I do juvenile hearings. I had a mother and daughter that I had in front of me this evening. And while I was telling the mother that your child is getting ready to learn a hard lesson because the things she did made no sense, and the mother said, listen, I understand. And by the way, tell the state's attorney I think she's doing a great job. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? When you really feel it, when you know it, when you've lived it, you know the services to deliver that the people want.
That's right.
And so she's doing a really great job there. But I do have my concerns because there are people, and this is unfortunate in our communities. There are people who are looking at the things that she is doing, and now they want to say, oh, she's just trying to go to the next level.
See,
and it actually bothers her. It bothers her a great deal, Chief, okay?
Sure it does. That's
because
ridiculous.
she did the things she was doing before she thought about state's attorney. And the truth is, if she was an arrogant person, she would tell you she got 90% of votes. So if she wanted to go to the next level, that's a given. But that's not what it's about. But it's not only happening to her.
Sure.
When we have good teachers, they seem to put the good teachers in the worst places as if they want the teacher to leave. You know, we were talking about the things they've taken out of our schools. You know, we don't want to have schools that teach trades because that's money. They took all of that away.
Sure.
You know, we've been trying to get a police cadet program in the schools like ROTC. Now, I have these big arguments because I say to these school folks, you want these children to go join ROTC so they can go fight foreign wars, but you don't want to have a police cadet program so they can go and patrol the communities they grew up in. There's something wrong with that.
Sure.
And something very, very wrong with that.
And that's why I asked that question, because when I was asking about the folks bringing things to the state's attorney, I just picked her out of the blue because, you know, again, you hit on a great point. Now, we won't do certain things, but yet we will, once you see the programming and all the other things that she's trying to accomplish, instead of engaging in that and being a part of it, people will pick it apart and say, "Oh, you're only doing this for that reason."
Well,
that's discouraging.
Let me give you this part of it too, because your listeners need to understand this, and this is a hard one. You know, I've had this juvenile diversion program for 17 years now.
Sure.
In that 17 years, we've moved more than 5,500 children.
Sure.
We've moved more than 5,500 children through our program.
Sure.
When the state's attorney was running for office, she talked about our program. You know, she was our general counsel for years. And she talked about how she wanted to enhance diversion, and she wanted to look for ways to get a hold of these children before they got into trouble.
Yep.
And that she knew, based on her experience, we could do this and it would not be difficult. Well, Chief, let me tell you what happened. People in Frederick County filed a lawsuit because they believe that any juvenile that was arrested should be put into the system. There should be no diversion. Now, you and I would say, well, wait a minute, this is pretty insane. Now, we would say that if we were not educated.
Sure.
What do I mean? Our governor just built one of the largest juvenile detention facilities in the state, right here. Now, if you spend all of this money, and I should mention to you, got $30 million from the legislature, and then he took $20 million out of the school's budget to build a juvenile detention facility. Well, now, Chief, understand this. If your governor takes that kind of money to build such a facility, he's a politician. He can't have empty jail cells and empty dormitories. Do you understand?
Sure.
Somebody's got to go in there. Well, back to education, we need to understand this. And she was frustrated. We found a way to get around them because she's smart like that. But it was kind of shocking. And I got to tell you, I was even kind of taken real fast. Now, I always try to do things behind the scenes. I've never been one to seek out the press, try to stay away from them because I know these folks. Mm-hmm. But it was frustrating for her to find that people actually wanted to do this. But also, she's a Black female. Back to education. You know, our Black women have always been outgoing. Chief, come on, they've stood the test of time.
Yes.
And the other side of America knows that. They don't want these Black elected officials to do well. In Georgia, you've got a Black county executive, a Black chief of police, a Black state's attorney, and they're beginning to turn things around, but these are all females. It's, you know, when we talk about education, it leaves the classroom and it finds its way to our community. Now, the question is, to what degree and what's the value that comes with it? If you teach the children nothing, then they're coming back to serve their community with nothing. Instead of having Google, our children might as well have the World Book. They might as well have an old set of encyclopedias that still says Ronald Reagan is president of the United States. This is the sadness that we're confronted with. We started out talking about pointing the fingers. We've got to point the fingers at ourselves. We've got to stop trying to find a way to blame everybody else for things that are wrong in our community that we could fix.
Sure.
We elect people who do next to nothing, and we re-elect them.
Well,
we somehow believe that our politicians are. We might as well be in the old Roman days when we look at these politicians as if they're gods. They're not.
Well, Phil, I tell you, you've kind of lit up my chat line here, and I want to read a couple of comments. I'll start with Gina. Gina says that we have to teach ourselves and our children to respect each other. We can work with those that we respect. When we respect our teachers, our children will respect them and listen to them. And she also went on to say that they took those trades out of the schools because we were learning the basics of surviving and becoming productive members of society. Now we have to go back for-profit trade schools to learn what we were learning in the public schools. She thinks it's a setup for failure, but the concern she has is that we are willing to accept that failure.
Because we won't point that finger at ourselves, and we won't say, and Gina's absolutely right. But we need 10,000 Ginas. Gina, we need you to find people. Call me, Gina. We can do this long distance. This is what we must do.
And she will. She'll work you to death, man.
Well, it's a good way to die.
That's right.
I don't have a problem with it. But she's right. But ask Gina how much help can she find to make these changes happen. This has got to stop. We have many of Gina's. The problem is, and I guess let me try to end with this because I know we're getting close to that time.
Yes, sir.
The Ginas and the Mr. Lees and the Chiefs and the rest of us, we've got to find a way to do what they did. I think it was 1980s or something when they talked about join hands across America.
Sure.
Chiefs, we've got to figure out how to connect. We've got to figure out how do we get to Gina and help her even if it is long distance. These messages must be getting out. We've got to get these messages out to people and get into these villages, hit that light switch, turn the lights on, and kick these people who've fallen asleep beside these trees and make them get up and get involved. That's what we have to do.
Well, you're going to have the last word on that, Phil, because you're absolutely correct. And you know, it's just so frustrating